The insolvency numbers are not great, not surprising given all the things that Canadian consumers are dealing with. And they're not great from any angle, no matter how you look at them. One of the licensed insolvency trustees also does a bankruptcy study, and we're going to talk about that in the context of industry numbers as well. Comes from debt relief firm Hoyes Michalos. We're joined by Doug Hoyes, co-founder of the firm, insolvency trustee at Hoyes Michalos. Hello there.
Hello, Bruce. Good to be with you.
What are the key findings of your recent debt study? What are you seeing out there?
It's kind of what you would expect. Debt levels are higher. The number of creditors people have is higher. Individual balances are higher. Pretty much everything is higher. That's the quick overview summary of it.
And what would you say about the drivers of that data now versus, say, 12 to 24 months ago?
Well, if we go back in ancient history, because I'm an old man, I would say that most people who came in to see me had suffered through some triggering event, job loss, illness, divorce. And that still happens now, but over the last year or two, it's been a lot more structural in nature. So when I ask what was the key event that happened, it's like, well, there really was no key event, but my groceries are more expensive, everything's more expensive, my paycheck has not gone up, and I'm just gradually getting deeper and deeper into debt. That's why I'm here. So that's a big shift from what we've seen in the past.
Now, when we talk about insolvency, it's kind of a term that includes a number of different things that people can do. One is a consumer proposal, another is a bankruptcy. What are you seeing in terms of trends on which solution people are pursuing?
Well, for the last number of years, it's disproportionately been consumer proposals, sort of like an 85%, 15% split, depending on what province where you're looking. We are starting to see, though, a greater percentage of bankruptcies creeping in there. It's not really noticeable to any big extent in the stats, but I think if you and I are having this discussion a year or two from now, that percentage will be increasing because people are getting so far into debt and their incomes are not keeping up that it's like, you know what, I can't even make a proposal to my creditors. I've just got to file bankruptcy. So we're seeing that. The other thing we're seeing is that in a consumer proposal, your total debts, not including the mortgage on your principal residence, have to be $250,000 or less. Well, if you bought a pre-con, 5 years ago and you can't close and the shortfall is $300,000, you can't file a consumer proposal. So there
Right.
are people who are now starting to suffer from some real estate issues who are knocked out of the consumer proposal filing ability altogether.
I want to ask you more about the housing market because we've been talking for a while now about the renewal cliff, people who got the best mortgage rate ever at the peak of the pandemic, and now they're renewing at a much higher rate. And as you say, people who have made purchases that they now can't exit because they can't sell for what they bought for. What are you seeing from your clients about how housing is affecting that the family balance sheet and the family P&L, the income statement?
Well, that's exactly the two things it impacts. So it's certainly affecting the cash flow because, obviously, even though rent has perhaps eased off a little bit over the last 6 months, it's still pretty high
Yeah.
and hasn't kept up with your income over the last number of years. But yes, if you've got a house and you're renewing your mortgage, it's very possible that your payment has gone from, I don't know, $3,000 a month to $4,000 a month. That would not be a shock at all. Well, did your after-tax income go up by $1,000 a month? Probably not. And so that's certainly putting a squeeze on you. And then on the balance sheet side of it, it's like, okay, well, in the past, if you got into trouble, it's like, I'll just sell my house. I'll just remortgage it. Well, you can't do those things now. You don't have enough borrowing capacity. Nobody's going to buy it. So it's harming you in two areas, like you say, balance sheet and cash flow.
What are you noticing from a demographic standpoint? So obviously, where you joke about you being old. Well, you and I are both a little older than we were a decade ago. What are you seeing now for the young millennials, the Gen Zs who are coming to your office with questions and maybe real dire circumstances?
Yeah, we're certainly seeing more people at the younger end just because they're now aging into it. If you look at it historically over the last 20 years, the average age of someone who files a formal insolvency, a consumer proposal or a bankruptcy, is around age 44. And it hasn't varied much, over the last number of years. And it makes sense. Age 44 is kind of the perfect storm. You're not the president of the company yet, so your income is not at its peak. Perhaps you've got a family, so your kids are still at home. You're paying for them. Your parents are probably still alive, so you haven't received an inheritance, and maybe you're helping support them. So you got maximum expenses, income not the maximum, gets into debt problem. But we are also seeing the younger demographic too, because again, unlike when you and I went to school, Bruce, you have to get a student loan now to go to school
Yeah.
unless your parents are paying for it. Like there's just mathematically no way to do it. When I went to school, which was in the 1980s, I could go to the big university, get a summer job, and earn enough to pay my tuition, no problem. Parents helped out with living expenses. It was pretty straightforward. Now that's just not mathematically possible. So you're probably graduating with student loan debt, which means that for the first number of years after you graduate, you're not able to save, build anything because you've got this debt you got to pay off. So it's delaying family formation. And if there's any hiccup whatsoever, guess what? Now I'm filing an insolvency because I've had to rely on other debt. So it's certainly a big burden on the younger people.
You and I work in two separate but connected parts of the continuum of care for Canadian consumers. So there's the licensed insolvency trustees, there's the nonprofit credit counselors. I think we share a view that we just wish people would get in touch, like pick up the phone and talk to us before things get so acute that you have no choices. What counsel would you provide to people to help them think through? Like, when should I pick up the phone? Because hopefully it's not the day in which you have no other choice.
Yeah, one word I would use is math. That's my answer. Math.
Baths.
Math.
Oh, math. I thought you said, okay, you're taking a bath on your phone.
Well, that's a good word too.
Yeah,
And it rhymes.
math.
Maybe
Okay, what do
I'll
you mean
use
by
that too.
math?
Well, so compound interest is fantastic if you got money in the bank. But if you have debt and it's 25% interest on your credit cards, then it is growing really, really fast. So my first question would be, let's look at the math here. Do you think you can earn your way out of it?
Mm.
And in a lot of cases, the answer is no, no, I can't. Okay, well, then you need to reach out for help. Talk to a credit counselor, talk to a licensed insolvency trustee. If you've got an accountant that you work with for your business, fine, talk to them. But you've got to understand your options, and the sooner you do, the better, because the sooner you can then get into some kind of program to deal with it. Debt very rarely gets better on its own. It just gets worse. So the sooner you reach out, the better.
And we see, and I'm sure you see, people, they're grasping at straws. And so they're getting a second mortgage, or they're going to a subprime lender, or they're going to payday loans. And in fact, they're doing all that they can, but they're making the problem a heck of a lot worse.
Yeah, you can't borrow your way out of debt, and you can't borrow your way at even higher interest rates. So again, do the math on a payday loan. What does it cost to pay it back? And the answer is it's a huge number. And that's why when you look at our data, if someone has a payday loan, they probably got four or five of them. You have to get another one to pay off the first one, and it just compounds it. So if you are in that payday loan trap, or if you are going to the very high interest alternate lenders, you're probably already underwater. You definitely have to reach out for help.
What are some things that you're thinking about over the course of the next 12 to 24 months? I'm not asking you to make some bold prediction here, but if you've been in this field for a long time, what are some of the things that you're wondering about or thinking could unfold here in this country as it relates to debt?
Well, obviously, unemployment is a huge problem, and that number is going up because if you don't have a job, it's kind of hard to service your debt. The next thing would be the level of expenses. I mean, you and I can look at the Stats Can numbers to see what the rate of inflation for food was. And food inflation isn't a big deal if you make $1 million a year because you're only spending 1% of your income on food.
Yeah.
But if you are a lower income person, you might be spending 20 or 30% of your paycheck on food. So 5 or 6% food inflation is a massive number. And given the events in the world, I don't know if you follow the news or not, Bruce, but
Yeah, there's been one or two things happening.
Yeah, there's a bunch of stuff happening. So I don't see that making things better. And then I guess the third thing would be what you already alluded to, which was the real estate market. Okay, maybe that'll help if you're a renter because maybe prices will come down. But if you have mortgaged your future, no pun intended, there may be no way out there if this collapse continues. So those would be the three things we're keeping an eye on.
I was talking earlier in the show about the fact that I don't drink, but after this conversation, I feel like maybe now's the time just to have a wee dram of scotch or something like that.
Might not be a bad idea. Cheers.
Tough times. Doug, thanks for joining us today. We appreciate it.
Thanks, Bruce.
Doug Hoyes, licensed insolvency trustee. He is with Hoyes Michalos, and he was here to talk about the stats in the insolvency world. Unfortunately, there's very little, AKA no good news on that front.